Um, okay, so we're going to be looking at, Kim, did you want to record this?
Done.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. We're going to be looking over the next 3 weeks at the Torah portions that we read on the Yamim Nar'im, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Um, I would love for us to get to Yom Kippur afternoon, but I don't think we're going to. We're going to try and do first day of Rosh Hashanah today, second day of Rosh Hashanah next week, and then Yom Kippur morning the week following. So, what is Rosh Hashanah? What are we celebrating on Rosh Hashanah?
The new year.
The new year. What does that mean?
The head of.
The head of the year. Okay. Except Rosh Hashanah really isn't the new year, you know, right?
Right, Pesach is.
Well, not Pesach, but the first of Nisan, 15 days before, or 8 days before Pesach is, 14 days before Pesach is the beginning of the new year, actually.
Right, with Pesach.
Technically, there are 4 New Years, right? Rosh Hashanah is one of them. It's not the calendar New Year. It's not when we start counting months. You know, if you're, nowadays today it's 9/2/20, right? If you were to do that in Hebrew, today would be 7, whatever the date is in Hebrew, 2/20. It wouldn't be 1, because Rosh Hashanah is not the beginning of the calendar year. So what else are we celebrating then? What makes this? What is the tradition behind why this is called the New Year?
The birth of the world.
The birth of the world. The birthday of the world. And can someone define, like, what is that? What do you mean by the birth of the world? Just so we can hone in on it. What do you mean the birth of the world?
Creation.
Okay, so the creation of the world. So does that mean that creation started today or creation ended today? Because remember, creation was a 7-day period.
Is it the creation of the Jewish concept of the world?
What is the Jewish concept of the world?
That it all started with Adam and Eve in the garden?
Well, no, that's what we're talking about. But the question is, when you say creation, what specifically are you talking about? Is it the first day? Is it the moment?
The Bereshit, the one that's described in the Bible.
Well, there are a couple described in the Bible, but Bereshit. So you're saying
Bereshit.
Human.
Okay, I'm going on mute.
Wait, I'm hearing many different things. I just heard Bereshit and then I heard humanity. Those are 2 completely different things.
I think, to me, it means the completion, at God's completion, because it's the 7th month, and somehow I relate the 7th month to the 7 days of creation.
We weren't there for the first 6.
Okay, so then creation
6, yes.
creation is actually, so Rosh Hashanah is actually the 7th day of creation. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I think.
Yeah, and then I amended that to the 6th day, because the 7th day God rested. He didn't do any creating.
The 6th, when he created
right.
man and woman.
So Rosh Hashanah is the 6th day of creation.
It should be, because we weren't there.
So it's not really a new year then. It's really the 6th day of the new month of the new year, right?
But it's part of the bigger group called creation. It's when
But
we
it's
became
part of the bigger
created.
group. Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right, folks. Let's stop guessing. Let's look at a text.
Yeah, good idea.
Although that was good. You all were right there. That was fantastic. All right. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen, or some sort of throw something at me, or beautiful? Okay.
Yes.
So this, we're going to start with the tefillah. We're going to start with a prayer that we say on Rosh Hashanah. Right? This is from the Machzor, and it's called Hayom Harat Olam. Today, the world came into being. Harat, whoever said the birth of the world, you were on to something, because Harat means birthing. So today it says, on this day the world came into being. Hayom Harat Olam. Hayom Ya'amid B'Mishpat. On this day God stands in judgment. Kol Yitzurei Olamim. All of the formations, all of the things that were created in all of the worlds. Im kavanim, im kavadim, im kavanim, rachamenu karachem aval banim, whether it's children or servants, It's as if we're children, have compassion on us as a father has compassion on his children. Im kavadim einenu lecha tuluyot. If we're like servant, if you want to think of yourself as a servant, our eyes are fixed on you until you favor us. Ad shetachanenu v'totzicha or, until you bring forth our judgment as light. There's another connection back to creation, right? Just like God brought light or into the world. Ayom Kadosh, revered and holy one. So you were all correct. Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary, not the anniversary maybe, but the celebration of, the remembrance of the creation of the world. Beautiful. So, if you were master of the universe and you were in charge of deciding what we should read in the Torah on Rosh Hashanah, given that today is the creation of the world, what would you choose?
Breshit.
Breshit. Okay. Anything in particular from the book of Breshit? Or did you mean Parshat Breshit?
In the beginning.
Parshat Breshit. Okay, good. Beautiful. Anyone have any other suggestions as to what we might want to read? I'm sorry?
People.
What is
Human.
people?
Adam and Eve.
The story of Adam and Eve. Okay, also from Breshit. Good. Thank you.
Abraham,
The story of Abraham. Why the story of Abraham?
beginning of our faith.
Okay, and how does that connect to the theme of the creation of the world and all that good stuff?
Because
What's
it
the connection between the
differentiates
creation?
us. It's ours.
Right, but we said Rosh Hashanah is the creation of the world or of humanity. So how does our particular story connect to that theme? Why would we want to read about our
The
story? if Rosh
recognition
Hashanah is-
of the one God. Man's connection to the idea of one God.
Okay. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I'll go with it. I'll take that. Any other suggestions?
Yeah. So in this week's parsha, we read about the blessings and the curses, and Moses shared that with the Jewish people before they entered the land. And just as we're entering a new year, maybe we should read about the blessings and the curses so that we stay on track.
Very interesting, very beautiful. I wonder if that's why we read this portion in the weeks before the new year. I wonder if it was set up that way, right?
Right.
Of course, I know that it was set up that way, which is why I'm giving you kavod for pointing that out, right? It was set up that way so that we would read this. Beautiful, Wendy. Thank you. Thank you. So I agree with all of you on these different suggestions. And I think, to just drill down and get very basic, I think if you want to be obvious, the obvious choice, if you're celebrating the creation of the world, would be the story of creation, right? That makes sense. But of course, we don't read that on Rosh Hashanah. When do we read that? When do we read the story of the creation of the world? Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz.
I know. After Simchas Torah.
On Simchat Torah, we read it on Simchat Torah, and then the week following, right?
Right.
When we read Parshat Breshit, we do not read about the creation of the world on Rosh Hashanah, which is the celebration of the creation of the world. It's a little strange. So what I'd like to do with you today is to look at what we do read and try and figure out why. So here it is. We read on the first day, chapter 21, verses 1 through 34. So what we're going to do is just kind of read through this real quick, just so we all kind of know what the text is. Once we get a few verses in, you'll probably recognize it, and then we'll go back and we'll ask ourselves why. So would someone like to read a little bit for us?
I can start, Carolyn.
Thank you.
The Lord took note of Sarah as he had promised, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had spoken.
I apologize for all the he's. I took this right off of Sepharia. I apologize
That's
for all
fine.
the he's.
Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken. Abraham gave his newborn son, whom Sarah had borne him, the name of Isaac. And when his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, as God had commanded him. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would suckle children? Yet I have borne a son in his old age. The child grew up and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. Sarah saw the son, thank you, whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham playing. She said to Abraham, cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Can someone else read?
Who wants to take over?
I'll be happy to. It's Joan.
Thank you, Joan.
You're welcome. The matter distressed Abraham greatly, for it concerned a son of his. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed over the boy or your slave. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be continued for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him too, for he is your seed. Early next morning, Abraham took some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He placed them over her shoulder together with the child and sent her away. And she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water was gone from the skin, she left the child under one of the bushes and went and sat at a distance, a bow shot away, for she thought, let me not look on as the child dies. And sitting thus afar, she burst into tears. God heard the cry of the boy, and an angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heeded the cry of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold him by the hand, and I will make a great nation of him. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and let the boy drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He dwelt in the wilderness and became a bowman. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, chief of his troops, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything that you do. Therefore, swear to me here by God that you will, not deal falsely with me or with my kith and kin, but will deal with me and with the land in which you have sojourned as loyally as I have dealt with you. And Abraham said, I swear it. Then Abraham reproached Abimelech for the well of water which the servants of Abimelech had seized. But Abimelech said, I do not know who did this. You did not tell me, nor have I heard of it until today. Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a pact. Abraham then set 7 ewes of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what mean these 7 ewes which you have set apart? He replied, you are to accept these 7 ewes from me as proof that I dug this well. Hence that place was called Beersheba, for there the two of them swore an oath. When they had concluded the pact of Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, chief of his troops, departed and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk at Beersheba and invoked there the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham resided in the land of the Philistines a long time.
Thank you so much, everyone, for reading. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. Let's brainstorm a little why we would be reading this Torah portion on Rosh Hashanah.
Because it's the first time we have a commandment from God.
Test of our faith.
That's interesting. So it's actually not the first time we have a commandment from God. Not really, not technically a commandment, but that's an excellent guess.
Test of
Carol,
our faith.
is it to remind us of the covenant with God?
Ah,
To remind
okay.
us of our covenant with God?
Beautiful. So right. So when they what do you call it? When they circumcise,
Circumcised.
yeah, beautiful. Okay, so maybe that's it. Bear in mind as you're thinking though about the themes of Rosh Hashanah, right? Of the creation of the world. Um, is there a connection between the covenant and creation?
I
I'm not
think this
suggesting
is,
there. I'm not suggesting there isn't. I'm just something we should bear in mind. Berna, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think this is where the covenant takes on the continuity of our people, because it's given through Isaac, where he makes sure that, for generations to come, we'll have a continuation of our people and taking on the
Okay,
covenant of God.
and the connection to that to creation.
When God created man and woman, how did one continue the generations to come? And so it was God giving it then through Isaac, through Sarah and Abraham, his chosen children, who ended up having, and he was the one that the progeny of the life of our Judaism, of our culture, of our history.
Okay, I'm sensing. So I'm sensing two different themes. I'm feeling two different themes, and I feel like you're leaning in one, and I'm leaning in the other, which is
Okay.
beautiful, right? So, and what I mean, and not just you, Berna. I'm talking about everyone actually. So those two themes are universalism versus particularism. So what I'm hearing from you is that this Torah reading is sort of a celebration of the particularism of the covenant with God, and specifically, really not the Jewish covenant so much, but the Judeo-Christian covenant, if you will, right? That whereas creation itself is not at all about particularism. There's no faith, there's no tribes, there's no nothing. Creation is just about everything, universalism. So I'm struggling a little to see the connection between the particularism that some of you are bringing out and the universalistic message that I at least hear in the creation of the world. What do you think?
Rabbi David, does it have to do, and I'm trying to think, does it have to do with the Sarah giving birth? Does that have to do with the perpetuation of creation?
Ah,
That
okay. So,
I
right. So, yeah, no, that's very nice, Carolyn, right? So, Sarah giving birth is an act of creation, right?
and perpetuity,
Yeah,
if that's the
yeah.
right
No,
word.
that's very nice. Sure. Yeah, Sherry, go ahead.
Created in in the image of God, we create as well now.
Ah, very nice. Yeah. So building on the idea of the perpetuation of creation, right, is that God can create, and since God created us in God's image, therefore we can create. Very nice. Beautiful.
This is Sandy. I was thinking that somewhere along the lines of the fact that this was a deal made between Abraham and Abimelech in Beersheba and planting the tamarisk. I feel like that has something to do with the creation and the bonding of these two different people, Abraham on the one hand and Abimelech on the other hand. And somehow I read something into that, a joining together of these two forces.
And connect that to creation for me.
I believe it's the first time we see our father Abraham creating a bond with what might be an enemy.
Ah, huh. That's very beautiful. So how do we perpetuate creation? Not only through giving birth physically, but through birthing peace.
Thank you. Yes.
And
Wow.
diversity.
And diversity. That's so beautiful. That's really, really nice. All right, Chavre, let's look at another text. So we looked at the Torah reading. Let's look at the Haftarah. So the Haftarah is the reading from the prophets. So let's look at the Haftarah from the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And again, this story hopefully will be a little familiar to you. And just quickly, I just want us to read through it so that we know the story, and then we'll kind of do the same thing and wonder why this is the Haftarah, and if there's a connection between the Torah reading and the Haftarah and the themes of this day. And the answer to that, of course, is yes. Who would like to read for us?
I'll read. This is Joyce. This is Joyce. I can read the beginning.
Go ahead.
There was a man from, I'm trying to enlarge, from Ramathaim of the Zaphites in the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuphah, and Ephraimite.
Boy, you get extra points for reading all those names, Joyce.
But poorly. He had two wives, one named Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah was childless. This man used to go up from his town every year to worship and to offer sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh. Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord there. One such day, Elkanah offered a sacrifice. He used to give portions to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he would give one portion only, though Hannah was his favorite, for the Lord had closed her womb. I think I lost something. Moreover, her rival, to make her miserable, would taunt her that the Lord had closed her womb. This happened year after year. Every time she went up to the house of the Lord, the other would taunt her, so that she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why are you crying? Why aren't you eating? Why are you so sad? Am I not more devoted to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose. The priest Eli was sitting on the seat near the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. In her wretchedness, she prayed to the Lord, weeping all the while, and she made this vow. O Lord of hosts, if you will look upon the suffering of your maidservant, and will remember me, and not forget your maidservant, and if you will grant your maidservant a male child, I will dedicate him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor shall ever touch his head. As she kept on praying before the Lord, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. He said to her, how long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Sober up. And Hannah replied, oh no, my lord, I am a very unhappy woman. I have drunk no wine or other strong drink, but I have been pouring out my heart to the Lord. Do not take your maidservant for a worthless woman. I have only been speaking all this time out of my great anguish and distress. Then go in peace, said Eli, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. And she answered, you are most kind to your handmaid. So the woman left, she ate, and was no longer downcast. Early the next morning, they bowed low before the Lord and went back home to Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah and the Lord remembered her. Hannah conceived, and at the turn of the year bore a son. She named him Samuel, meaning I asked the Lord for him. And when the man Elkanah and all his household were going up to offer to the Lord the annual sacrifice and his votive sacrifice, Hannah did not go up. She said to her husband, when the child is weaned, I will bring him. For when he has appeared before the Lord, he must remain there for good. Her husband Elkanah said to her, do as you think best. Stay home until you have weaned him. May the Lord fulfill his word. So the woman stayed home and nursed her son until she weaned him. When she had weaned him, she took him up with her along with 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, and a jar of wine. And though the boy was still very young, she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. After slaughtering the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. She said, please, my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who stood here beside you and prayed to the Lord. It is this boy I prayed for, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. I, in turn, hereby lend him to the Lord, for as long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. And they bowed low there before the Lord. And Hannah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We're actually going to stop there, Joyce. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. So this is, of course, the story of Samuel becoming a Nazirite, right? Where it says no razor shall touch his head. He's the first, or not the first, but he is a Nazirite. Excuse me. So what's the connection? Now you know the Torah reading. We've read the Haftorah reading, and we know the theme of creation. What's going on here? Why are we reading these? Joan.
Connection that I see is in the first story, God is making a vow to Abraham. And in the second one, Samuel's mother is making a vow to the Lord.
Okay. Connect that to creation for me.
They both have birth.
Right, but
what's birth is creation?
Right, but what's the vow piece? How does that tie in?
Well, I tie it into Yom Kippur.
Ah, okay. So this would have been a good thing to read on Yom Kippur.
It's a setup. You're supposed to be getting ready to deal with all your vows.
It's a setup. Nice. Okay. All right. It's a setup. I'll take that. Good. What else? Jackie, please. Make sure to unmute yourself, Jackie.
Sorry, I thought I did. They're both women who are, Sarah couldn't have children. The next one couldn't have children. He made them both fertile. And
so that's an interesting piece here, right? Is that before we were talking about how birth is an act of creation, right? So God creates the world, we give birth, and therefore we are in God's image and we're able to create. But what's interesting that Jackie just pointed out is that it really isn't us. I mean, it is us, of course.
But it can't happen without God.
Right.
God's hand in it in both of these cases.
Right. In both of these cases, God, just like with the creation of the world, God has to be involved with the creation of these two children. Beautiful, Jackie. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Debbie, please.
Again, I just try reading it and hearing it. It's again that God from outside of me. And that's where I'm having my disconnect at the moment.
Okay, wait, tell us more about that.
Because we're here we are, God's giving them, again, it's that God outside of me. It's like I don't have response. I don't understand how I'm not involved in. I'm just playing with it. My covenant. And you know I had an issue with the covenant, but I understand that it's a connection.
Right. Let me ask you this, Debbie. Is creation possible if there is not a God beyond us?
I have to play with that. No, serious. I'm gonna write that one down.
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's.
Neither do
you know,
I.
Yeah, I don't. My gut is that if you buy into the traditional thinking around creation that God created the world, then you have to have some sort of external God. But if instead you subscribe to, I feel uncomfortable even
I know.
distinguishing these two. But if you buy into the scientific way of thinking, then you don't need a God externally. And of course, they're two sides of the same coin. They're not two separate things. But I don't know. That's an interesting question, right? Why? How can we connect to these texts when we feel God so strongly within, and these texts promote God so strongly without? Not at the. I just want to be clear. Without, not at the expense of the within, but just without. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, Carolyn, please.
I'm not sure. It's like I don't believe in a God without. I don't believe that. But I do believe that it's hard to put into words. Like we don't do things by ourselves. There's in creation and in anything I do, it's like I don't do it alone. There's always help from other sources. If you want to say that other source is God, okay. But maybe it's, am I making any sense? It's like I don't exist alone in a vacuum.
Of course. No, I'm. Problem is today we can say that because everything that I do, of course, God or whatever you want to name it, is a part of that. The problem is, in creation, there was no me. So there can be no partnership. Again, if we buy into the, to the original image of creation, there was only God. So there is no partnership possible. I think. Betsy and Annette.
Okay. I don't understand what you just said about there's no partnership possible, because even in creation, God had a partnership with everything that God created, whether it was the animals or the earth or whatever. And then we came along when he created man and woman. But the other thing that I wanted to say before was that when you were talking about if you subscribe to the scientific explanation of the creation, I used to teach science, and so my feeling in my heart was always, even if you understand all the theories about how scientifically the world and the universe was created, the ability to find out and make those discoveries, to understand them, to articulate them, all emanate from God. If God didn't want us to think those things, I don't think that it would have happened. So I think that the direction that we go in is in some way attributed to God.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant on that last point, only because that sounds a little bit like, why were there dinosaurs? God put dinosaurs there so that we would ask, why are there dinosaurs? As opposed to them being a part of evolution and the natural.
No, but it could be that God's process was evolution. And then we understood. Then we had the reasoning ability to translate what our findings were in our discoveries were really clues that God left us about evolution.
Okay, I can go with that. I can live with
Okay,
that. Thank you,
me
Betsy.
too. Okay.
Annette, go ahead.
Hi. I'm thinking about a completely different aspect of the stories, and that's the promises that were fulfilled. Hannah said that if she bears a child, she will give him to the Lord. And with all the hardship of separating from that son, she fulfilled the promise she made. Like God has fulfilled her promise, she bare a child. The same with Sarah. Sarah, on one hand, doubted, but God, from his side, has given her a son like he promised. So it's a matter of trust and building a relationship individually with whatever you call this. I mean, I don't know if I believe in God. I don't know what I believe in, but it's building a trust with that entity.
Beautiful. And you know, Annette, what you also brought to the forefront is the sacrificial aspects of both. There's a lot of sacrifice going on in these, right? So there's Hannah offering her son back to God as a Nazirite. There's Abraham sacrificing, if you will, Hagar and Ishmael by sending them out. There is, and then of course on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, we're going to read about the sacrifice of Isaac. So there's not just a promise made here, but there's also a sacrificial aspect of parents having to lose something. So on the one hand, in the act of creation, we gain, but there seems to be a flip side where there's also at least the potential of a traumatic and tremendous loss in the act of creation. Sherry, go ahead. You're muted, Sherry.
Sacrifice is oftentimes seen as a proof of faith. You're willing to give something so that something that someone else is going to hopefully provide for you will happen. So you're putting faith in God by showing him that you're willing to sacrifice in his name.
Absolutely. And we'll talk more about that next week, right?
Okay, yeah.
I wonder, no, you're absolutely right though. I wonder what the connection between sacrifice and the creation of the world is, or if there is.
Well, here's another thing I thought of: the trees, and the expression about if a tree falls in the woods and no one is there, did it make a noise? Or here we're not there for the creation of the world up to the time of the creation of man. Yet we read about it, we talk about it.
So
we have faith in that it happened.
So are you saying that we could ask the philosophical question, since no one was there to hear it, see it, experience it, did the creation of the world actually happen?
The way we read it. Well,
the way we read it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way we read it. That's fair. Absolutely. Yeah. And you know that the way the rabbis dealt with that, Sherry, is we talked about this in one of the, I don't know, at some point we learned this, by every morning having us say, Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech. Thank you, God, for forming the sun and causing the darkness and creating the darkness, right? Because when we look at the sun every day, we're not supposed to say, oh, look, the earth, circled around its axis again. We're supposed to say, oh, look, that's the creation of the sun. We experience creation, according to the rabbis, when we see the world. That is every new tree, every new bud, every new grass, every time we see a tree for the first time each day is an act of it is us witnessing the act of creation, according to the rabbis. Beautiful. Jackie, please.
Yeah, 2 points. On that act of creation, isn't that part of the Modani? That every day we recognize that we get up and there's like a new
So that's not really creation. Moda Ani is more about
renewable commitment.
rechargeable batteries, right? That's what we talked about. So when we say Moda Ani lefanecha, thank you God, shechazarta binishmati, that you returned my soul to me, not that you created it again, but that you gave it back. The imagery, every night before we go to bed, we say biyado afkid ruchi, into your hand, God, I entrust my soul. So the idea is that every night God takes our soul out of our body, plugs it into the wall charger, recharges it, and then if we're lucky, gives it back to us in the morning. So it's a very interesting comment. Modani is, I think, less about creation and more about rejuvenation, restoring maybe. Restoring, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Jackie.
And that piece about sacrifice, none of those sacrifices actually became a human sacrifice.
Right.
Isaac didn't die, and there was tremendous faith with Abraham and Sarah and Isaac to go up there, and for Hannah to have this tremendous faith that God wouldn't just snatch up her son and take him away, but I'm sure he stayed with Hannah and just dedicated his life to Hashem.
Yeah, well, I'll argue next week that what Abraham did was not a tremendous act of faith. It was actually an act of cowardice and weakness. But yes, that what you just said is certainly the traditional way of thinking about it and understanding it. Yeah.
And Hagar and her son wasn't killed either, even though she thought she was going to sacrifice him.
True, they were kicked out and their lives were ruined, but it started an eternal battle between
right.
Islam and Judaism. But yeah, I guess so. You could. Annette, go ahead, please.
I think that the idea of having a covenant with God and having a brit milah, which no one asks the son, do you agree to become part of this tribe? It goes back to actually giving, when Hannah gives her son to God as without asking him, she's actually deciding for him what his life is going to look like. The same with taking Isaac and the Akedah. No one asks the child. It's some kind of I'm looking at it through the lenses of the 21st century, when parents ask their kids, would they like this? And maybe explain, if they don't like it, why it has to be done. But it's huge decisions of you are going to belong to this tribe, or you're going to do this in your life. And I think it's a point to think about.
Very nice. Very beautiful. Absolutely. There's a sense of, there's a lack of free will, which is in contradistinction, I think, to the whole idea of creation, right? When God gives us free will in the garden, we're born with free will. That's what makes us human. And yet in these stories, we do have, as you said, sort of a lack of free will. Beautiful. All right, Chevre, I'm going to share with you one more text. A mind-blowing tidbit. Rosh Hashanah is not the anniversary of the creation of the world. So this is from Sikta de Rav Kahana, and it says, Rabbi Eliezer taught in the Talmud that the world was created on the 25th of Elul. So Elul is the month that we're in right now, right? Today is, what is today? Today is the 13th day of Elul. So in 12 days, that's when the world was created. This implies that Adam was created on Rosh Hashanah. How? Well, if the 25th day is the first day of creation, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, Rosh Hashanah is the 30th day of Elul, and then, you have to count by evenings, sorry. I forgot, right? You always have to count the night first. So to the 25th, to the 26th, to the 27th, to the 28th, 29th, 30th, to the 31st, not 31st, the 1st, that's when Adam was created. Okay? Unless, wait a second, let me just check something here. Hold on, don't go anywhere. Don't go. Yeah, the 29th is Erev Rosh Hashanah. Okay? So it says, in the first hour of that day, the idea arose in the divine mind to create humankind. In the 9th hour, Adam and Eve were commanded not to eat at the tree of knowledge. In the 10th hour, they transgressed the commandment. In the 11th hour, they were judged. And in the 12th, pardoned by the Blessed Holy One. The Blessed Holy One said to Adam, "This will be a sign for your descendants, just as you stood before me in judgment on this day and were pardoned, so too will they stand before me to be judged on this day and be pardoned." So according to Rabbi Eliezer in the Talmud, the world was created on the 25th. And if you go back to remembering the days of creation, right? On the evening of the 6th day is when God imagined to create humanity. Rosh Hashanah isn't the birthday of the world, it's the birthday of humanity. So it could be that that's why we read about these two births on Rosh Hashanah. Because we're not actually remembering the creation of the world, we're remembering and celebrating the creation of, I'm a little hesitant to say, but maybe the most important part of creation, humanity. And there's another little tidbit in here also, which is on this day, not only was Adam created, but Adam ate from the tree, was punished, and was judged by God on this day. Right? It says here.
And was pardoned.
Excuse me. And right, was judged and pardoned. So in the first hour, God imagined the creation of Adam and Chava. In the 9th hour, they were commanded not to eat from the tree. In the 10th, they broke that commandment. In the 11th, they were judged. And in the 12th, they were pardoned. So on this day, we're celebrating and we're remembering creation as the creation of humanity. We're also remembering how Adam was judged on this day and pardoned. And we hope the same is true for us. So now, last question for you. Think back to the two texts that we just read, the story of Isaac and Abraham and Sarah and all of them, and the story of Samuel. How does judgment fit into those two stories? How do those two stories not only connect to the idea of the creation of humanity, but how do they connect to the idea of the judgment of humanity? Marcia, I see your hand up.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about the connect to the judgment because I raised my hand before you asked that question.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Go, just go. It's all you.
No, but that's okay. I'll connect it anyway. I'll make something up. So what I wanted to say about, I didn't realize that those things that you just said in the first hour, second hour, third hour, that everything was so quick. I was envisioning them, like living in the garden for a couple of months at least before this happened. But
no rest for the weary.
Yeah. So in a class with Akiva, he mentioned that when they ate from the tree of knowledge, that Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent, and of course they didn't get away with that, and that when they were exiled, and Adam heard the punishment per se that Eve would give birth in pain, was the first time he realized it was the first time he realized their own mortality, but also the idea that there would be children after them carrying on their line. And that apparently was when he named Eve and gave her that name. She hadn't had a name before that, and that was because she was going to be the mother of all subsequent creation. So that entering into the real world and out of the garden was both a punishment but also a promise. Basically you're going to die, but you're going to live on. And then when we hear the like with Sarah and Hagar, that they get exiled, and as you said, yes, they're spared, but there's war from, in the seeds of a forever war there. That kind of judgment is like, okay, you're going out there, you have free will, and you will forever be judged on how you navigate that world and what you teach your children. And will there be war? Or as somebody said earlier, will you learn to make peace? So I don't know, in some way that judgment is just inherent in the fact that they were judged in the garden, they were exiled, but at the same time, they were given a promise. And then all of these, the Torah portion and the Haftorah, as I think, I don't know if it was Annette or somebody said it's about promises, promises fulfilled and promises broken. And then we have Yom Kippur, where we acknowledge the promises we've broken and then promise to do better.
That's sort of amazing, Marcia. What you just brought up for me is the idea that judgment doesn't just come from God, because when it comes to we as parents, and are we raising our kids right? Are we raising them to create peace in the world? That we are our own worst critics and judges. And I don't know, I'm not sure if this is where you were going, but what you raised for me the power of self-judgment and also the judgment of others. I'm seeing this a lot now with parents, parents who are choosing to send their kids to school versus parents who aren't, and everyone's judging each other. How could you do that? How could you not do that? We're so judgmental. I hadn't thought of judgment in that way. That I don't know if that's where you're going, but that's what it brought up for me. It's very powerful. Very powerful. Joan, go ahead, jump in.
Could you please bring up the last reading? Because it raised a question for me. I'm not going to answer your question. I'm going to raise another one. Forgive me.
I love it. Go for it.
The part about the 25th of Elul, where was that?
Very top here.
Okay. The world was created on the 25th of Elul. And what comes up for me is, how can that possibly be? Because the world was created in 7 days, and there had only been 7 days of night and day. How do you get the 25th of Elul for when the world was created? It just leaves me in a quandary.
No, because the 25th of Elul was day one. The what we call today the 25th of Elul, that concept didn't exist back then.
That's what I'm saying.
Right, but so that was just day one, and then later on we decided, that was on the 25th of Elul. It's not, there's, that was day one. 25th of Elul is day one, 26th is day two. Does that make sense?
Not really, but I can accept it.
All right, fair enough. So here's another piece about judgment, and this will come up, I think, more profoundly next week, perhaps. But how does God judge parents, God's co-creators? How does God judge them in how they treat their children in these two readings that we have, right? How does God, I wonder what God thinks about Sarah kicking Hagar and Ishmael out. Now we have a hint in the story where Abraham goes to God and says, I don't want to do this. And God says, no, listen to your wife. Do what your wife says, which is the most important lesson any man ever learns. But, how does God feel about what Abraham's going to do in the second day of Rosh Hashanah's Parsha? How does God feel about, how does God judge how we as parents participate in this act of creation? And is there a connection? Is there an interface between how God judges us and how we judge ourselves? And as someone, I didn't see who said it before, but someone pointed out, it's not just judging, it's pardoning, right? So is this a pardoning? Does the fact that God pardoned Adam on this day of creation, does that mean that we are ensured a pardon? I don't know. Sandy, I'm giving you the last word.
Oh, okay. How does God, you asked the question, how does God feel about Abraham dismissing Hagar, or I'm paraphrasing. And I have always felt that God was not happy that Hagar was banished. And so therefore, Ishmael was given this great nation of Islam. And compensation.
Right. And we were given a not so shabby nation of Israel.
Not so shabby, not so shabby.
Not so shabby.
Right.
Not
but,
so shabby.
But had not Hagar been banished with Ishmael, what would the world look like today?
Right.
Vastly different, I suspect.
Right. It's a fair question.
But where was God?
I'm sorry?
I'm asking, where was God when Abraham made this decision?
That's for next week. That's for next week, Annette. Hold on to that question. We're going to get to that, I promise. Friends, I have to jump off because I have a hard stop at 11:30. But I see that Marcia and Joan still have thoughts. So keep sharing if you'd like. And I will see you next week for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the Akedah. All right, friends? Mwah!
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shana Tova.
Thank you. Always enlightening.
Thank you.
Marcia, you want to go first? Marcia? Are you still here, Marcia? Do you want to go first? All right, I'll go first. I just am sitting here thinking, to throw a monkey wrench into the whole conversation, the God that I believe in is not a judgmental God, nor a punishing God. And I don't know how that fits into any of this, unless you look at all that we talked about as being some kind of a myth or story. Anybody want to?
Yes, I could I haven't really engaged in
Sure.
it, but I believe the same as you. God is not a punishing God, and in the long run, it all belongs to God anyway. Both nations belong to God. And so we are just players in there so that we could learn how to get back to the garden. How do we get back to the garden? Not by punishing, but we have been given gifts, certain gifts, and we are allowed to use these gifts. And if we fail in using these gifts, then we're failing ourselves. We're not failing God, even though God is sees it all, because it's his, everything's his or hers, whatever. Anyway, that's what I have to say. I'm sure I have a lot more to say, but not right now.
I agree. I see it more as consequences rather than punishments.
Yes. And because we are looking to get back to that garden of peace. Peace dwells within us. We are truly peace because we are made in the image of God. And if we could live up to that and do that, but we are faced with a lot of whatever it is that holds us back from that, a lot of ego too.
Shabri, I really think that it's fear that holds us back.
Yes, of course.
Well, to me, it's I'm either looking through the eyeglasses, my eyes of love, or fear. And once I can figure out a way.
Yeah, but where is that fear coming from, Debbie? You have to
so many different places. That's what I'm saying. It's not one fear. It could be the fear for me. It can be, for me, was and still shows up as the fear of unconditional love. I didn't know what it looked like, so I would ignore it. And now that I can see it and hear it in a different way, I don't have as much of it. It's not as paralyzing to me when it shows up.
Because you're becoming the peace person inside.
And that's all I'm saying is when I see you, when I can look in the faces, when I can talk with Joan, when I can call them Maxine, Joanne, these are people, souls. Susan, we shared a room together. We coughed for 3 weeks, for 2 weeks together, and it was a blessing. Because we looked at it as a blessing. It's not that my roommate had a bad cough. We laughed about it because we put on our earplugs and we just friggin' dealt with it. There could have been for another 2 people together. Oh my God. Oh, how can I sleep? How can I?
Yes, but then you don't have to do it again. Once you go through that, Debbie, you don't have to.
But it shows up differently again. It'll come up again.
No.
Are we having a debate or
For
listening
me.
to each other? Is this a debate or are people sharing their opinions?
It's me. It's how it shows up for me.
And I honor that. Thank you.
I honor it too, Caroline.
I honor your eyes
Thank
also,
you.
but it's.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
Is this
Life
class over? Goodbye, everyone.
It is. And one of the beautiful things that we do is we hear each other, take what we want. We don't throw the whole baby out. We only throw out the bathwater that's dirty. That won't clean me any longer. Let's get fresh water.
Wait a minute. And let's recycle that bath water because water is precious.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Have a blessed day.
We can do this offline later, Joni.
Mwah.
Bye, all. Have a wonderful afternoon. Hi, Marilyn. Bye, Jill. I see your name. I don't see your face. And I don't think I really know you yet. Sherry, is it? Cheryl Lang. Hi. Nice to meet you. Helen, I know you. Tony, I don't know you. Tony Kaiser yet. Sue's
Hi,
iPhone. That's cool. And Bonnie, hi. Mwah. And now Shabri, I don't, Yochi, I don't really know you yet, but I see your name. Well, I need.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.
This is my joy, doll.
You too.
How I share joy. Whoever's going to pull the plug, just pull the plug, because otherwise, bye. I'm pulling my own plug.